Thank you, Rich, for that great introduction. This is one hell of a brunch. I was thinking as Mel said to me, there's going to be a quiz on all of the names of the candidates and elected officials. But if you sit back and just think for a moment, it wasn't that long ago that list of elected officials or candidates you could probably name on one hand or two hands. And Rich, while we do have a ways to go in Virginia, long term, we're going to kick your butt. I want to thank the Victory Fund for allowing me to come and talk to you a little bit and share what's the good and bad, and specifically some of the issues, obviously, that affect the LGBTQ community. First of all, let me give you a report on all of the good news coming out of Congress. Well, we got that out of the way. But there are enormous progress has been made. I remember in 2006, not that long ago, when I was governor of Virginia. I was the first governor in Virginia's history to ban discrimination against gay state employees. Now, that was the morally right thing to do. But the fact that it still had to be done as late as 2006 shows that there's enormous challenges ahead of us. There has been progress already in terms of getting rid of odious legislation, odious laws like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, making sure that everyone in this country has the right to marry who they love, no matter where they live in this nation. Seeing progress in terms of the number of elected officials, both current, former, and one that needs desperately to be reelected because it's going to be tough in Wisconsin. You must return my good friend Tammy Baldwin to the United States Senate. But the truth is, even with states taking action, even with most forward-leaning companies banning discrimination, in too many places all across this nation, you can still be discriminated against in terms of where you're served, where you work, how you are treated, because whom you love. That is not America in the 21st century, and the Victory Fund's all about changing that. And unfortunately, I want to share a little bit about what's going on in this town. From all of you who live either on the right side of the river in Virginia or the wrong side in Maryland, or for those folks like these great students here who come from schools around Philadelphia, we're in a really unusual and scary time. And for those of you, people keep coming up to me and saying, Mark, you're involved in the Intelligence Committee. Tell me it's not as bad as it seems. In certain ways, it's worse. This is a party, and I don't want to bring anybody down, but when a president of the United States, against the advice of his own military, wakes up and tweets out a change in policy in terms of how we treat transgender troops, that is not an America that represents the future. When we see this president who says he has compassion for dreamers, and we work our tails off, frankly, Democrats and a number of good Republicans as well, to say that it makes common sense, moral sense, and economic sense that the 800,000 plus young people who were brought here by their parents, 95% of whom are either working, studying, or in the military, that we want to welcome these young people to our country. And we would go as far as to say, we'll even give you part of your crazy wall, and then at the last minute for him to renege. Or how many more tragedies do we have to see in terms of senseless gun violence? Las Vegas, Orlando, or the power of these young people, high school students out of Parkland, touched our nation. To see the close to 1 million folks that assembled here in D.C., but equally important, the 130 plus places around the country and around the world that said, yes, you can support the Second Amendment, but that does not mean that we shouldn't get military-style assault weapons off our streets. And again, we have a president that says, one morning wakes up and tweets and says, oh, I'm all for that, until the NRA reels him back in, and we end up with virtually no progress. Now, I know the reason why I was asked to speak today partially was to be in support because of my support for your issues, but I figured in this quiet, small, intimate crowd, you really wanted me to give you the real dirt on Russia, right? Here's what we know, and why it's still so important that we get to the truth. Russia massively intervened in our elections in ways that were unprecedented. They hacked into both political parties and then released information only to hurt Clinton and to help Trump. They either hacked into or scanned 21 of our state's electoral systems. And the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security, they gave the answer for the first 9 months of 2017. They would not tell the 21 states that were attacked that they were attacked. They used the excuse, now get this, that the top election official in the state did not have a high enough security clearance to be briefed on that kind of information. That's crazy. And they will be back. And this White House still has not directed the FBI, the CIA, the NSA to make election security a higher priority, because you don't need to go in and actually change a vote total. All you need to go in and make sure that people have a doubt about election results. So we've put forward legislation that says every voting machine in America ought to have a paper trail, an auditable trail, so we know foreigners or others cannot mess with our elections. And we also know, and this week is going to be a big week, we also know that they used some of our social media companies. And I think I was in the tech business longer than I've been in the political business. I was the co-founder of a company called Nextel. I'm the only politician that says, even when I'm speaking, leave your cell phones on. Doesn't bother me at all. And I think Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are great, iconic American companies. But what they did, the Russians were able to expose the dark underbelly of social media. I'll give you one example. Out of Texas, Rich, where there was a group, and the mayor may have heard of this, there was a group called Heart of Texas that tried to put out very awful tweets about and fake page about racist and other kind of comments. Same time they created, and this was all being created out of a single site in St. Petersburg, Russia, even though people were representing themselves as America, they created a site called United Muslims of Texas. Then on the Heart of Texas site, they said, these Muslims are going to try to bring in Sharia law, so we need to go show up at this mosque in Houston and protest. They said to the Muslim site, these folks are going to show up at our mosque. We need to go and defend the faith. But for the fact that Houston cops were there, we could have had, because hundreds and hundreds of people showed up, we could have had in Houston in October of 16 the same kind of tragedy that befell Charlottesville in my state a year later. So listen, I'm all for American technology and innovation. I'm all for people being successful. But Americans deserve to know when ads, political ads, are being sponsored by foreign entities. Americans deserve to know that the information they post has some level of security and privacy behind it and is not going to be scraped and used for political candidates. And because there is so much more in this story that still has to be told, and if you add up what the Russians spent, the thing that scares the heck out of me, we just passed a budget, $700 billion for defense. I believe in a strong defense. But what the Russians did in terms of intervention in our election, and then in the French elections where they took down, Facebook actually did take down 30,000 sites, or in the British election with Brexit, when we've had members of parliament come over here and say, we see this intervention. You add up all that, it's less than the cost of one new F-35 airplane. So as a nation, I think we need to be secure, but I worry whether we're investing in the world's best 20th century military when conflict in the 21st century may be more often waged in cyber and misinformation and disinformation. We're still trying to get our arms around what happened in 2016. The next wave, think about all the candidates that are coming, deep fake technology, when you can put somebody else's face on your body. Or for someone like the mayor or I, who've had some level of public exposure, they can have a running video of us, me standing here, and with my voice, different words come out. And those tools can be used to ferment hate and division. And the toolkit that was exposed in 2016 at such a good value will be repeated going forward. And that is why we need to make sure that both the Senate intelligence investigation and the Mueller investigation are allowed to continue until the full truth comes out. And that is why, particularly folks in the LGBTQ community, have to be concerned when you have this White House and its allies do stuff that I've never seen in my lifetime. Not only attack the Mueller investigation, but give full-on ad hominem attacks against the integrity of anybody who works with the FBI. Or ad hominem attacks against anybody that works in the Justice Department. History has shown that when a nation of laws, when people start attacking without regard to truth or validity, the folks who enforce our laws, you can get to a pretty scary place pretty quickly. We saw some evidence of this just a few weeks ago when it was one of these slightly sketchy Trump officials or sycophants basically was trying to say he may or may not honor the Mueller subpoena. In a country like ours, when people start choosing which laws they want to obey and which laws they want to not obey, anyone that falls into any minority category will be the first to bear the burden and brunt of that selective enforcement. So these are scary and frightening times. I believe over the next 6 to 8 months, we may have a level of crisis unlike anything we've seen in our nation. And we will all be tested. And what I ask all of you to do is 2 things before I bring on the next person who's a great sign of hope. One is, and I know I'm preaching to the choir right now, as much as sometimes when the news comes on and it's one more spectacle after another, you want to throw a shoe at the TV, I feel the same way and I'm inside the TV. But don't do it. Don't do it. We cannot tune out and turn off from our engagement in the political process. All that will do will be turn over the keys to those on the extremes. And that is not where our government and our country is governed best. And the second thing I'd ask you to do, I never thought this would be that hard, but in this new age where information and misinformation can be warped and changed without regards to any validity, just because somebody said they read something on the internet does not make it true. So we have to be willing to call out. And this is hard to do, whether it's at work or school and where you worship. We have to be willing to call out those who propagate hate and lies just because they said they saw it on the internet. We have to be willing to stand up because the coarsening of our country, perpetrated in many ways by a president who has at best an occasional intersection with truth, we have to guard against. We have to guard against. But there is good news. You know, and a lot of it happened, Rich, just last year in Virginia. Just last year in Virginia, a state that 20 years ago was as red as any state in the country, compared to Idaho in terms of its election returns. We had a great candidate for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, but we had a whole series of candidates that were running for our House of Delegates that, frankly, a lot of folks didn't think they had a shot. But on election night, we showed not only did they have a shot, but we came within one delegate of taking back the Virginia House of Delegates. And so I want to bring to this stage one of those winners, someone who went face to face with all of the divisiveness, the hatred, the slurs that might have meant to a lesser person, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. Someone who has redefined what it means to run not only as a transgender person, but as a person who was committed to education and health care and making our traffic get fixed. I remember calling Danica on election night to congratulate her on her international recognition, the fact that she had won, and boy, the person she beat was the epitome of the opposite. And instead of, God, you do have a sense of humor at times. And on my call to Danica on election night saying, Danica, this is great, you're making history, this is so tremendous. She says, Senator, that's great, but I really need help on Route 28's traffic problems. She showed that, yes, Rich, even in Virginia, if you take a relentless focus on issues, if you are who you are and are proud of that, people all across our Commonwealth and all across our country will respond. Please join me in welcoming to the stage a new member, a rising star in the Virginia House of Delegates, my friend and your friend, Danica Roem.